Mr. Mayor, your trip
Yes.
to
I didn't even know you were there.
Mr. Mayor, your trip to Central and South America, you spoke a little bit about this at the top, about how tough it is to discourage folks who've already been through so much from continuing to make their trip on to the north. My colleague Craig interviewed a bunch of those folks who were in Ecuador, who were looking for jobs, who weren't able to find jobs in Ecuador, and obviously America has jobs. And they were thinking about still making the trip through the gap. They weren't aware that you were in the city and that you were asking them not to come. And even if they had been, they wouldn't have been deterred. So how reasonable is it to expect that this trip has any lasting impact on what's actually happening here in New York on the ground, day in and day out?
And I think that's a legitimate question that you're asking. Number one, we cannot sit back and do nothing. You know, we can't sit back and just say, okay, if you tell us the reality of what's happening in New York, we're going to look at what was happening in our own country, but anything is better than what we are. You know, what we did learn in Ecuador is that there were a number of people who left, and they're trying to now come back to Ecuador. They reached out to their government and said that they want to come back because the reality of what life is like, living in a congregate shelter, unable to work. And so there are those who are attempting to come back to their countries. And so my goal was to make sure that I was transparent. It was never my desire to say, if people wanted to pursue away from their countries, I wanted to be transparent and clear of what you're coming through. And I wanted to use those local mediums to do so. And we did that. But there were those we spoke with when we were there who are asylums and migrants who stated that we got it. We know it's dangerous. We know the Darien Gap was a dangerous trek, those who went through. But, the product of the American dream is just so rich to those countries. And then when you're fleeing, Ecuador is fleeing real drug violence. Venezuela is fleeing, real destabilization. And they believe, based on what was being promoted, that America was the only place that they can come, and New York City was the final destination. So my role was to be as transparent as possible, and that was my attempt. Was it successful 100%? I don't know that. We're not going to know. Is someone going to hear the voice of the mayor of the city saying, you're not coming to a 5-star hotel? I'm hoping they did. But I have to try everything to help this city deal with this crisis that we are facing. And I'm going to try everything to do so.
Mayor, if I may, hold on one second. Mayor, it was part of the trip was fact-finding as well. Maybe you or Commissioner Castro want to talk about that for a second?
Yes, and that's very important, 'cause I think people lose on those parts of it. They lose the fact-finding part of it. We learned a lot by being on the ground, and that was probably the most significant part of it. That's part of the conversation I'm going to have with former President Bill Clinton. But the information we were able to receive on some of the social media platforms that are being used, learning what Colombia, willingness. Colombia, they have absorbed 2.5 million migrants and asylum seekers, and they're saying we can sort of stop the flow a lot if we have some assistance with the infrastructure. They've been left alone to basically handle it on their own. Panama is passing people through. They're unwilling to absorb any. Costa Rica is unwilling to absorb. If we can help Colombia, we can really slow this pace down. And that is some of the things that we learn in the partnership we want to have with Colombia. We want to present to our federal lawmakers. I have a call scheduled with Congressman Meeks as the ranking Democrat on foreign affairs. So stuff we learned on the ground in our fact-finding was crucial that I didn't know, wasn't aware of, and we want to continue to grow on. Commissioner Castro, is there anything you want to add?
Thank you, Mayor.
It's on.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. It is clear from what we saw and what we learned that cities have a very critical role in this issue. We are experiencing a new era of mass migration. And so it makes sense for us as cities to be working together. Bogota, Quito, Mexico City, El Paso, Chicago, New York City. We have to be working together to address this. And this is all being led by 7 million Venezuelans leaving the country, all within a very short amount of time. Technology innovation, social media is driving this. And then smugglers have become entrepreneurs. We're seeing a jungle that used to be seen as uncrossable, now crossed by hundreds of thousands of people. So New York City, Mayor Adams, we truly are leading the way. Ask any expert who has been looking at this issue for decades. They've been saying time and time again, cities like New York City, global cities need to lead the way, and this is exactly what we're doing. And again, you know, there's a lot of humanity here that we had a chance to see face to face. I was not allowed to speak to people, but I did. I did speak to a family, a mother with 4 children. I saw myself in them. I was a child migrant myself. And they are terrified at crossing the jungle, but they were. And in part because they didn't find these opportunities elsewhere in South America. We want to make sure we have those conversations so that these children and these families don't have to cross the jungle and possibly not make it.
Yeah, go ahead, Nolan. Go ahead, Nolan. Yes.
Some basic facts about the trip. Can you say how many folks went along with you from the city administration and how much was